The Cypress room sat half-empty by 9. Porter Wycliffe checked his watch. 70 minutes. His phone glowed once with a final message. Sorry, work emergency. Beside him, by the window, a woman sat alone at her own two-top, her water glass empty for the third time. She had been there longer than he had, and she had not once looked at the door. Porter stood, walked 4 quiet steps, and stopped 1 step short of her table. Did your date not arrive either? Marlo Halstead looked up slowly, and the smallest weight in the whole world lifted from her shoulders. If a single sentence has ever changed the shape of your week, you already know how this kind of story begins. Stay with us. This is the story of 2 strangers who almost did not speak, in the 4 months that followed. She did not answer at first. She studied him the way she had been trained to study any approach in a public room. White shirt, navy collar, a watch older than the wine list. He held no glass, no business card, no posture of a man who had practiced the line. He simply stood there waiting for her to decide. No, she said. He did not. Porter glanced at the empty chair across from her. Mine sent a message about an hour ago. Yours? Nothing. That is worse. She almost smiled. Probably. He did not sit. He did not assume the invitation. He only said, there is a corner table by the kitchen. The cooks talk too loud, but the bread is warmer. We could share dinner if you want company. If you do not, I will go back to mine and finish a glass of wine and pretend this was the plan. Marlo Halstead had been the youngest chief executive at a Charleston boardroom for 6 years. She had said no to 1,000 men in 1,000 rooms. She said yes to this one. They moved together. He pulled out her chair the way someone does who learned it young, without ornament. She noticed. They agreed without speaking that they would not ask each other what they did. She introduced herself as Marlo. He introduced himself as Porter. They split a piece of striped base, a bottle of Sancerre she ordered in clean, unshowy French. He recognized her accent the moment she spoke to the waiter. Low country, old family, money that did not need to announce itself. You read at the table while you waited, he said. What was it? Stoner. John Williams. Assad book. Yes. A good one. Yes. He told her, between courses, that he had walked past a 320-year-old oak that morning at Magnolia Plantation. She admitted she had never been. You should go, he said. Trees that old put things in proportion. She laughed then. The first time that night, he mentioned his daughter once, Hazel, 8 years old, loves dolphins. Then, in the same breath and the same quiet voice, he mentioned that his wife had died 4 years ago. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Marlo did not ask. And the way she did not ask was what he noticed about her. She told him she ran her family's business. She did not say what kind. He did not press. When the bill came, she reached for it on instinct. He had already paid. He had done it between the second glass and the dessert menu, without making a moment of it. She looked at him a beat longer than necessary, and he met it without flinching. He walked her to the curb. The October air carried salt from the harbor. He waved a cab forward. Will I see you again, Porter? I do not know, Marlo. But whoever did not come tonight, they should have. She got into the cab. He stayed on the corner of Meeting Street, under the yellow street lamp, until the taillights turned and disappeared. Inside the cab, for the first time in 2 years, Marlo did not tell the driver to take her straight to the office. At his small house on Trad Street, Porter stood for a long time in the doorway of Hazel's room. She slept the way she had slept since she was 4, one arm wrapped around a stuffed dolphin. He did not know the woman's full name. He did not know where she lived. He only knew that for the first time in 4 years, he had carried a stranger's face home with him. Monday morning, 8:45. The executive floor of Halstead Coastal Hospitality, 12th floor of a building on Broad Street, glass walls and morning light. Marlo sat at the head of a polished walnut table, while her project leads worked through the agenda for the Ravenel House restoration. Ravenel House had been built in 1847. Halstead Coastal had bought it the previous spring with the intention of converting it into a 22-room boutique hotel. The structural drawings submitted by the firm of record had been rejected twice by the Charleston Historic Preservation Commission. 11 weeks of schedule had already been lost. Donovan Drexler, chief operating officer for 8 years, suggested they bypass the preservation review altogether and apply for a partial demolition permit. "We are bleeding time," he said. "Time is more expensive than charm." Vera Lindley sat at the end of the table taking notes. She had taken notes in that chair since Marlowe's father was still alive. She rarely spoke during project reviews. She spoke now. "There is a man here in Charleston," she said. "Independent. He worked on the restoration of Old St. Andrew last year. The Preservation Board trusts him." She slid a single sheet across the table. A name and a phone number. Porter Wycliffe. Marlowe did not change her expression. She signed the authorization for a consulting contract and slid it back. Donovan disliked it but could not object. Schedule was the lever he had just pulled. By noon that day, Porter was at Ravenel House alone. He laid his hand flat against the heart pine of the central beam before he measured it. He had done that since he was 23, a small private ritual nobody had ever asked him about. The beam was 178 years old. He measured it twice with a laser, recorded the numbers in a paper notebook, and moved to the next. His leather satchel sat open on a sawhorse. Inside, beneath the calipers and the folded drawings, was a thin manila folder he carried with him to every site. The folder held a diploma from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a current American Institute of Architects certification, and a black and white photograph from 2018, taken on the opening day of a tower in Boston. A younger Porter standing beside a fair-haired woman, both squinting into a low sun. On the back, in pencil, Porter and Annalise. Opening day. He had not known, when he signed the consulting contract that morning, who the client was. Vera had only said a large hospitality group. He had not asked for more. At 2:15, Marlowe walked through the front door of Ravenel House for the first time. She crossed the dust-bright foyer and saw a man with his back to her, in a gray flannel shirt, pointing up at the ceiling and speaking to no one. She recognized the line of his shoulders before she understood what she was looking at. Porter turned around. 6 seconds passed. Behind Marlowe, in the doorway, Vera read both faces and quietly stepped back outside. "Mr. Wycliffe," Marlowe said. Her voice held level. "Miss Halstead." A small nod. He had known her full name the moment he had read it on the contract that morning. He had signed anyway. She understood that without him saying it. She walked the building with him for 90 minutes. They spoke only of beams, load paths, original window glass, the question of whether the slate roof could be retained or whether it needed to be lifted, numbered, and reset. He was precise. He did not push his opinions. He laid them out like instruments on a clean cloth and let her choose. At the front door, on her way out, she paused without turning around. "Thank you for taking the contract, Porter." He did not answer, but his hand, resting on the heart pine of the doorframe, tightened a single notch. Friday morning brought a progress review at the site. Marlowe came in her work clothes. Donovan came in a charcoal suit and Italian shoes that did not belong on a construction floor. 2 senior engineers from Halstead Coastal sat in folding chairs taking notes on tablets. Porter stood at a card table covered with paper drawings, real wood samples, and a single hand-marked calculation sheet. He spoke for 22 minutes without a slide. He identified 3 places where the previous firm's drawings had miscalculated load. He did not name the firm. He did not assign blame. He pointed at wood and told them what the wood could and could not do. Donovan sat quiet until minute 18. Then he turned to Marlowe deliberately, in front of Porter. "Marlowe, we are paying an independent carpenter to correct the work of a $20 million project. I am not comfortable with that. If the firm of record is wrong, we hire another firm. We do not hire a man in flannel and work boots." The room held still. Porter did not look at Donovan. He slid a single page across the table, a recalculated load analysis, sourced to the American Society of Civil Engineers Standard 7. Donovan did not pick it up. Marlowe spoke without raising her voice. "Donovan, Mr. Wycliffe's numbers are correct. We are going to proceed with his recommendation." Donovan stood up and left the room without closing his laptop. In the hallway afterward, Marlowe began to apologize. Porter shook his head once. "Small. Do not. He is protecting something. People who feel safe do not talk that way." She looked at him for a long moment. The sentence would stay with her. She had felt the same thing for months and had not allowed herself to name it. That night, alone in her office at 9:30, Marlowe opened her laptop and pulled the cost reports for 3 previous restoration projects. The Beaufort Inn, completed 2021, Folly Strand Resort, 2022. Edisto Marina House, 2023. She had no structural engineering background. She did not need one. She had been chief executive long enough to recognize a pattern when she saw one. The same subcontractor. The same line item structure. The same margin band on all three. Harborline Restorations LLC. She ran a quick public search. 7 years old. Delaware registration. No projects outside Halstead Coastal. The chief executive on paper was a man named Cyrus Holloway. She did not recognize the name. She made a note of it in pencil. On a sticky note, in handwriting only she would read. The building emptied around her. The cleaning crew came through on the floor above. The harbor outside her office window turned from gray to black. She did not call anyone that night. She printed the reports, slid them into an unmarked file, and locked them in the bottom drawer of her desk. She kept the key on the same ring as the key to her father's old office, which she had never given up. She drove home with the radio off. She thought about Porter only once on the drive, and she thought about what he had said in the hallway. People who feel safe do not talk that way. She had heard a great many sentences in her life from a great many men who were paid well to be persuasive. That one was going to outlast all of them. Porter came home at 8. Hazel was at the kitchen table, drawing in colored pencil. A dolphin, a beach, 3 people on the sand, 2 grown, 1 small. He did not ask her about it. He kissed the top of her head, made grilled cheese and tomato soup, and read to her from The Little Prince before bed, the chapter about the rose. After she fell asleep, he stood at the window for a long time looking down the empty length of Trad Street, and for the first time in 4 years, he did not see Annalisa in every corner of the dark. Wednesday of the following week was a teacher and service day, and Hazel's school was closed. Porter brought her to the site. It was safe enough on the front steps, interesting enough for a child who had asked him for a year to take her to a real construction. He set up a folding chair on the second-floor portico above the entrance, gave her pencils and a large sheet of drawing paper, and pointed at the columns. She stayed there for over an hour, counting the flutes on each column with the patience of someone who had been raised to look closely. At 11:20, Marlowe arrived to walk the site. She saw Hazel before she saw Porter, a small girl in a blue jacket with 2 braids, so absorbed in her drawing that she did not register footsteps. Marlowe came around the column and crouched down to the child's eye level. "That is a beautiful column. Do you know what it is called?" Hazel looked up. She studied Marlowe for a careful second the way her father studied wood. Then she smiled. "Daddy says it is Doric. The simple kind. The strongest kind." "Your daddy is right." Hazel turned over her drawing pad. On the other side was a different picture. A beach, a leaping dolphin in the distance, 3 people in the foreground holding hands, 2 grown, 1 small. "That is me, and Daddy, and someone," Hazel said. "I have not met her yet, but I think I will." Marlowe did not say anything for a moment. She thanked the child and handed the drawing back carefully, the way she would have handed back a document she had no right to keep. Inside the house, she met Porter at the foot of the central staircase. Both of them knew she had seen the drawing. Both of them knew because Porter had seen her through the window. Neither mentioned it. They worked for 40 minutes, walking the second floor, where Porter showed her 3 new core bore holes he had discovered the morning before, 12 millimeters in diameter, 40 centimeters deep, drilled into specific load-bearing walls. Someone had been at the site after hours. She made a note of the locations. She did not tell him what she was thinking. Before she left, Porter said, "Hazel draws what she hopes for. Sometimes that turns out to be very close to what comes next." Marlowe did not answer. She rested her hand on the old doorframe for 1 second, and then walked out into the sun. That night she sat alone in her penthouse on the Battery and ate the same salad she had eaten in that kitchen for 600 nights. For the first time, it occurred to her that quiet and peace are not the same thing. At his house, Porter made macaroni and cheese, Hazel's favorite. Halfway through dinner, Hazel looked up. "Daddy, do you like Miss Halstead?" He chewed slowly. He had been honest with his daughter from the first month after Annalise died. He saw no reason to start lying now. "I think I do, sweetheart." Hazel nodded once, satisfied. She did not ask anything else. Children of 8 sometimes understand a thing faster than the adults who raised them. Friday morning, the expanded project committee. Marlowe at the head of the table again. Donovan came prepared. He laid out a new proposal. Demolish the entire interior load-bearing wall system on the second floor of Ravenel House. Replace it with a steel frame open plan. Raise the room count from 22 to 28. Project savings, $1.7 million. Project acceleration, 11 weeks. Porter spoke against it. The walls were original Heartpine cypress, drilled and pegged, irreplaceable by any contemporary material, with equivalent compressive strength. More importantly, the Historic Preservation Commission would revoke the entire master permit the moment they discovered original load-bearing structure had been removed. He cited Section 7.3 of the Charleston Historic Preservation Ordinance by chapter and verse. Donovan turned to Marlowe. Either he goes, or we lose the schedule entirely. Marlowe looked at Porter. Porter did not look back. He laid his palm flat on the drawing of the second floor and waited. Her voice stayed level, but something in it had hardened. Mr. Wycliffe stays. Donovan, you will find another way, or I will find another person to find it. In 8 years, she had never spoken to him that way in front of the team. Donovan stood up and walked out without closing his laptop. The second time in 2 weeks, in the hallway, Vera was waiting for Marlowe. She did not waste a syllable. I worked for your father for 22 years, and for you for 6. I have never seen a man react with anger over being asked to preserve a wall. Not unless there was something inside the wall. I know, Vera. I am looking at it. Vera nodded. She did not say anything else. For the first time in 14 months, she did not feel alone with her suspicion. Porter stayed at Ravenel House until almost midnight. He measured every wall on the second floor. He found the 3 new core-bore holes Marlowe had seen, and then, low along the baseboard of the third wall, a 4th older, painted over, easy to miss unless you knew where to look. He photographed each one with his phone in close detail, marked the coordinates on a hand drawing, and saved the file to a thumb drive he kept clipped inside his satchel. The pattern of the holes mirrored, almost exactly, the pattern that would have been drilled by a structural inspector verifying reinforcement points. Whoever had drilled them had known to look in those specific places. Whoever had drilled them had needed to know what the inspector would find before the inspector arrived. He sat on the floor with his back against the original baseboard and ran the calculations in his head. He did not have enough yet to accuse anyone. He had enough to believe. Belief, for a man like Porter, was not a soft word. It was the floor he stood on before he picked up a tool. He came home near midnight. Hazel slept with one arm around the dolphin. He sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. For the first time in 4 years, he asked himself what he had spent 4 years refusing to ask. If something happened to him, who would raise her the way Annalisa had wanted her raised? The question had paralyzed him for years. Tonight, it kept him awake, but it did not freeze him. It clarified him. He understood, for the first time, that the answer was not a name. The answer was a way of living. He had to keep living it. Monday morning, 7:45. Vera was already at Ravenel House when Porter arrived. She had a worn manila envelope under her arm. The corner of it was marked in pencil in her own handwriting. Harbor Line. Started collecting 18 August last year. She did not waste words. I need a person with the technical credibility to confirm this before I bring it to Marlowe. I have looked for 2 years. I could not find anyone with both the expertise and the independence until you. She paused and added a sentence she had clearly rehearsed many times in the dark. Marlowe trusts me. That is exactly why I cannot be the one to break this for her. The technical voice has to come from a man who has no career left to lose inside this company. That is what you are. I am sorry to say it that way. Porter took the envelope without comment. He understood the shape of what she was asking. It was not a small ask. Porter opened the envelope at the foot of the stairs. Inside, photocopies of 3 restoration contracts: the Beaufort Inn, the Folly Strand Resort, the Edisto Marina House, all signed with the same subcontractor. Harborline Restorations, LLC, itemized material lists, shipping invoices, inspection sign-offs, and a hand-drawn org chart. Harborline LLC, registered in Delaware 7 years earlier, chief executive on paper 1 Cyrus Holloway, annotated in Vera's hand, brother-in-law to Donovan Drexler. Vera had assembled every piece except one. She had no way to prove the structural reinforcements documented on paper, did not exist in the actual buildings. No structural engineer in the Charleston region would write a counter-report against an 8-year chief operating officer of a regional hospitality group. The professional risk was simply too high. She had taken the envelope to 2 architects in 2 years. Both had declined politely and stopped returning her calls within a week. Porter sat down on a stack of plywood and took out his laptop. For 50 minutes he cross-referenced the declared material quantities with the actual current load capacity of each of the 3 buildings' capacities that were public record through the Charleston Building Inspector's archive. He ran the numbers through analysis software he had kept since his Whitcomb and Stowe days, the same software that had certified the tower in Boston and the courthouse in New Haven and a dozen other buildings whose names he had not spoken aloud in 6 years. The result was conclusive. With the volume of cypress, reinforcing steel, and structural bolts declared on the invoices, each of the 3 buildings should have demonstrated load capacities between 38 and 47% higher than their current measured values. The gap could not be explained by tolerance. The gap could only be explained by the fact that the reinforcement had been built but never installed. The total dollar value of the gap, across all 3 projects, came to approximately $13.6 million. He sat back and looked at Vera. The light through the windows was the same light he had measured under at 23, when he had drawn his first published building. Some kinds of work feel the same in every decade. You have held this for 14 months. Do you know that Donovan was close to Marlowe's father? Rutledge hired Donovan. Donovan was at the funeral. Marlowe has thought of him as an uncle since she was 28 years old. That is the reason I held it. I needed to be certain before I broke that for her. Porter sat for a long moment. He was not hesitating from doubt. He was hesitating because he knew that the moment he handed this to Marlowe, she would not be able to step back from it. Once she knew, she was responsible for what she did with the knowing. That was a weight he understood from his own life. He picked up his phone and typed a single message. I need to see you tonight. Not at the office. 6 p.m., the coffee on Broad. Her reply came in 4 minutes. 2 words. I'll be there. 6 o'clock Tuesday. Blacktap Coffee on Broad Street. A small place with mismatched chairs and a kitchen smell that made conversation feel private. Marlowe came in a gray coat with no jewelry. She had not brought her assistant. She had not told anyone where she was going. Porter spread the papers on the small wood table. He explained the way he would have explained a drawing line by line, beam by beam, number by number. He laid out the timeline. He concluded with a single sentence. Donovan wants the second-floor wall demolished at Ravenel, because when he signed off on the structural reinforcement at the 3 previous buildings, he did not actually reinforce them. He only documented it on paper. If Ravenel is examined too carefully, somebody will ask the same question about the others. He needs the comparable evidence destroyed. Marlowe sat very still. She had trusted Donovan for 8 years. Her father had trusted him for 12. Donovan had carried her down the hospital hallway the night her father had the stroke. He had taken her phone away and made the calls she could not make. He had stood beside her at the funeral and told her, in a voice she had needed to hear, that she was ready to run the company. She had believed him because he had been the one to say it. She looked at the papers on the table for a long time. The pages were ordinary, photocopies, black and white. They did not look like the end of an 8-year relationship. They never did. She asked one question, and it was not about the papers. Why did you take this job, Porter? You are not who I thought you were. You do not need this contract. It was the first time she had said his name. It was also, the way she said it, the first time she had named the hidden weight of his resume. He answered honestly, because I liked dinner on Saturday night, and because the building deserved someone who would look carefully. A pause. I was not trying to be anybody with you, Marlowe. I am the man I became after my wife died. He had not said her name aloud to anyone except Hazel in 4 years. He said it now. Annalise died in April of 2021. 14 months from diagnosis. I was finishing a tower in Singapore when she was diagnosed. I came home. I never went back. After she was gone, I could not bring myself to draw another building she would not see. Wood I could touch. Wood was honest. Marlowe did not offer comfort. She was not a woman who offered false comfort. She laid her hand on his on the table 4 seconds and then drew it back. She decided in 8 minutes. On the drive home she made 3 calls. Henry Park, The company's general council meeting at 7 in the morning. Augustus Kemble, the chairman of the board, the head of internal audit. She did not contact Donovan. She did not contact any of the board members known to be close to Donovan. Wednesday through Friday she worked privately with Henry Park and Augustus Kemble. A forensic accountant was flown in from Atlanta under a confidentiality agreement. By Friday afternoon, the preliminary report matched Porter's calculations within 94%. The threshold for suspension and investigation had been cleared. Friday night, Porter read to Hazel until she fell asleep. The final chapter of The Little Prince. After she was breathing slow under her dolphin, he stood at her window and looked at the trees on Trad Street. And for the first time he said something in his own head to Annalisa that was not a question or an apology. "I think you would have liked her, Anna." It was not a request for permission. It was an introduction. Monday morning, 9 o'clock. The boardroom of Halstead Coastal Hospitality. 9 board members were present. Donovan came in exactly on time, which was usual for him. When he stepped through the door, he saw Porter sitting at the far end of the table in the same white shirt with the navy collar he had worn at the Cypress Room. He saw Vera standing beside the projector. He saw Henry Park seated to Marlowe's right, and he saw a man in a gray suit he did not recognize, the forensic accountant from Atlanta. Marlowe presented for 24 minutes. The technical numbers from Porter. The Harborline LLC history compiled by Vera. The preliminary forensic findings. Each claim with a citation. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She presented the way her father had taught her to present, the year before he died, with facts, in order, slowly. She had practiced the opening sentence in her bathroom mirror twice that morning. After the second time she had stopped practicing and started simply waiting for 9 o'clock. Donovan did not panic. That was the dangerous thing about him. He had spent 8 years cultivating composure under pressure, and he produced it now. He let her finish. He took a slow sip of water. He set the glass down with deliberate care, as though the glass were the thing that mattered in the room. "Marlowe, this man, do you know who he actually is? Porter Wycliffe, former senior architect, Whitcomb & Stowe, Boston, left the profession 6 years ago. He was placed here by a competitor. This is not an investigation. It is a coordinated attack." Donovan had run a background check on Porter the morning after the wall vote was overruled. He had been holding the result as ammunition. The room went quiet. Augustus Kemble was 74 years old. He sat at the head of the table where Rutledge Halstead had once sat. He spoke slowly. "It's Donovan. I know Porter Wycliffe. I sat on the jury of the AIA Boston chapter in 2018 when the Whitcomb & Stowe Tower was nominated for the honor award. I know why he left the profession. His wife died of cancer, and he chose to raise his daughter. There was no scandal. You, on the other hand, have just admitted to running a background check on a consultant to this company without going through human resources. That is a violation of company policy." Donovan was silent for the first time that morning. The board voted on a motion to suspend Donovan Drexler from the position of Chief Operating Officer, pending the completion of a full forensic investigation. The result was 8-1. With a single abstention from a board member known to be personally close to Donovan. Security escorted Donovan out of the building. His system access was revoked at the same moment. Outside the boardroom, in the empty hallway, Porter and Marlowe stood 3 steps apart. Neither smiled. Neither reached for the other. There was only a single small nod between them, 3 weeks compressed into one gesture. Augustus walked past them and stopped. He laid his hand on Porter's shoulder for 1 second. "Your father-in-law was a friend of mine. I am sorry about Annalisa, and I am glad you are working again." He walked on without waiting for a reply. Porter stood for a moment without speaking. Marlowe did not ask. She had begun to understand that Porter had chapters she had not read, and that she had time. 5 weeks passed. The forensic audit confirmed embezzlement through Harborline LLC in the amount of approximately $13.4 million within Porter's original estimate. Donovan Drexler was formally terminated by the board. The Federal Bureau of Investigation opened a parallel investigation into wire fraud and money laundering. Cyrus Holloway was arrested in Atlanta. None of this was Porter's business any longer. None of it was Marlowe's either. Halstead Coastal publicly committed to restoring Ravenel House to the original preservation specifications, with the schedule extended by 11 months. The Charleston Historic Preservation Commission issued a public statement of praise. The company's private equity backers were reassured by the speed and the transparency of Marlowe's handling of the matter. Confidence held. On a Saturday afternoon in early December, Marlowe came to Ravenel House, not to inspect, just to come by. Porter was alone, polishing the new handrail on the central stair, walnut over heart pine. She wore jeans and a soft gray sweater. She brought 2 coffees. She had not been to the site in 3 weeks, by deliberate choice. She had wanted, after the boardroom, to give Porter time. She had wanted to give herself time. They sat on the bottom stair. She did not ask the question she had wanted to ask for 6 weeks. He answered it anyway, on his own time. Annalise and I built our dream house in Brookline. She designed the garden. She did not get to plant the apple tree she wanted before she was diagnosed. He paused. I sold the house 3 months after she died. I moved here because Hazel loves the ocean. I had not planned to love anyone again. I did not think I had the capacity for it. And now? Marlowe asked, very softly. Porter looked at her for a long time. Now I think Annalise would have liked you. She used to say the woman who came after her would have to be someone who did not need to take her place. Marlowe did not cry. She took his hand instead the first time, on a worn pine step, in the slanted late afternoon light of a window cut for a different century. They sat there for 12 minutes without speaking. Outside, a horse-drawn carriage clopped past on East Bay, the way horses had clopped past that exact window since before the Civil War. Before she left, Porter said, Hazel wants to meet you properly. Can you do a Saturday? She nodded. She had a great many empty Saturdays. For the first time, the emptiness did not feel like something she needed to hide. On his way home, Porter stopped at Magnolia Cemetery. The light was already going. He sat by Annalise's headstone for 20 minutes. He did not say very much. He laid his hand flat on the stone the way he had laid it on the beam at Ravenel, the way he had been laying his hand on the things he respected since he was 23 years old. Her name is Marlowe, Anna. You would like her. I am moving forward now. Finally, a small wind moved through the live oaks above him. He did not assign meaning to it. He simply noticed it and stood up. For the first time in 4 years, he stood up from her grave without weight. 2 months later, in early February, Ravenel House opened the first wing for a private reception. Candlelight in the original sconces, the smell of new wood and old plaster. 80 guests, historic commission members, local press, the company's senior partners. Augustus Kemble stood by the front parlor with a glass of bourbon in his hand and a small private smile that nobody who had not known Rutledge Halstead would have understood. Hazel wore a pale blue dress. She stood between Porter and Marlowe, her right hand in her father's and her left hand in Marlowe's. It was the 3rd Saturday the 3 of them had spent together. The first had been at the beach, where Hazel had counted 17 pelicans and corrected Porter twice on the species. The second had been at the kitchen table in Porter's house, baking cookies and arguing about chocolate chips. Marlowe had lost the argument and laughed about it for the rest of the afternoon. Tonight was the 3rd. During the intermission, Hazel handed Marlowe a folded sheet of drawing paper. Marlowe opened it. It was the same drawing the Doric column, the 3 people, the dolphin in the distance, except this time, beneath the figure of the fair-haired woman, the child had written a name in blue pencil. Marlowe. Marlowe crouched down to Hazel's eye level. She did not say thank you in words. She held the drawing to her chest for 1 second. Porter stood 3 steps behind her, watching, and for the first time in 4 years he did not see Annalise where Annalise was supposed to stand. He saw only 2 faces he loved, exactly where they were. He understood, with a quiet that surprised him, that the 2 facts did not contradict each other. Annalise had not been replaced. The world had simply gotten larger. After the reception, the 3 of them walked along the battery to look at the boats in the harbor. Hazel ran ahead, counting the masts. Porter and Marlowe walked behind her, holding hands without ceremony. Marlowe stopped at the corner of Meeting Street, beneath the yellow lamp where Porter had stood the night the cab took her away. I remember this corner. So do we. He did not kiss her. He lifted his hand and brushed a strand of hair from her face, slowly, with the same careful attention he gave to Wood 178 years old. 4 months later, in June of that year, the Cypress Room added a 3rd chair to a familiar 2-top by the window. Hazel sat between them, telling them about a drawing competition at school. The waiter brought her a lemonade in a tall glass with a striped straw. She drank half of it through one breath and went back to talking. Porter and Marlowe faced each other across the table. There was no ring on Marlowe's hand. There was no hurry. They had time. When Hazel ran into the lobby to look at the koi pond, Porter reached across the table and took Marlowe's hand the way he should have taken it on the first night, if he had known. Neither of them had been looking. Neither of them had been ready. But on a Saturday night in October, two people who had stopped expecting anything sat at separate tables in a restaurant on Meeting Street, and one of them stood up, walked 4 steps, and asked a question that neither of them knew was the beginning of everything that came after.